Clap. All right. I actually just meant to say clap in the mic. I didn't mean for you to clap, but that's all right. So this is the Autohaus podcast. I have one GoPro in my left hand, and I have a mic in my right hand.
Oh man, what's this guy doing? Should I see you, like?
Yeah, just keep going.
Okay, I see what you mean about it resisting turns.
Yeah.
Doesn't want to throttle through the turns. So what are we doing right now, Ezekiel?
Today we spent the whole day installing Chris's Cusco. What model LSD is it again?
Type RS.
Okay, Cusco Type RS LSD, and we're 4.7 gear set.
Oh yes, I forgot about that too. Yeah, the Weir 4.7 and a solid pinion spacer as well from Weir.
Oh yeah.
This is all available from Battle Garage.
So the reason we're doing this podcast right now is because now we have half an hour of doing figure eights to break in the diff. So here we are doing it.
Yeah, you were right about this getting boring pretty quick.
Yeah. See, that's why I suggested doing the podcast, because otherwise it's like, dude, my arms get tired.
Yeah. And there's this Mustang guy probably wondering what the fuck we're doing right now. He's just sitting here watching us. It's pretty amusing, actually.
All right. So luckily we have this open spot, like not really a public road where we can do testing like this, but I'm surprised the amount of traffic for being a Sunday night.
This guy just following me. I just don't want to look super sketchy, but I think that's too late. Yeah, I hear it skipping and everything. It's making quite a lot of noise.
Maybe the camera picked that up, but that was like
Yeah, I know. It's pretty amusing, actually.
So this is pretty normal. When you put in a brand new LSD, it'll groan and clunk like that through the turns. So this is the typical break-in process, where it's half an hour of figure eights, accelerate in a straight line only, and then you turn. Yeah, you let off the gas when you turn.
Oh, okay. Let off.
Yeah. So you're supposed to. Yeah, I think usually it's a bunch of clutch in and clutch out.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing wrong then. I haven't been clutching in, so that's why it's been pretty rough. I just let off the throttle instead. But then if you think about it, that makes the diff lock, right? So maybe that's not good.
Yeah, that's not good.
So should we tell them maybe why we're doing this in the first place?
Chris, why are you doing this in the first place?
So, don't get peer pressured, guys. You learned about drugs in high school, right? They always tell you don't do drugs or don't fall into peer pressure. Yeah, don't fall into peer pressure, guys. I was hanging out with a bunch of Formula SAE guys one day, and they had an autocross course set up to test our Formula car. And as I was leaving, a bunch of them hopped into my car saying, "Hey, you should drive the course, man." And I said, "Oh yeah?" And then they're like, "Yeah, go drift it, man." So then I did. All was fine and dandy up until I rolled up to let them out of the car, and I heard a bunch of thunking noises. So yeah, that's not good.
So how long have you been driving with the diff like that?
So I drove it for maybe a day after that just to go run some errands, and I instantly knew that was a mistake because the moment I got onto the freeway, it just made like a bunch of noise, and it honestly sounded like a woodpecker, and it would just get louder. And yeah, I was terrified to drive it after that because it would act kind of like a locked diff when you're making a tight turn. But then as soon as it wants to lock, it just like makes this loud thud noise, which is probably not good. And today we found out the diff itself was rubbing against the pinion gear. So we haven't taken it completely apart yet, but that's gonna be a fun one to look at, right?
Yeah, so more accurately, it was like those plates inside. So Chris originally has an OEM LSD, so it was the plates, like the center, that big rectangular center portion of the OEM LSD. That's what was the head of the pinion gear rubbing on.
Yeah, it was rubbing on the side of it, right?
Oh yeah, so the side of that center LSD unit.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll have to take a look at it when we have more free time, but curious to see what happened to it. Because you don't really hear about, well, you hear about diff failures, but I don't know if you hear about ones like this, right? Too often. I was also abusing it though, and it's original 250,000 miles on that diff. So,
say that again on that diff.
250,000 miles on that diff, so.
Yeah, that's a good point about being the original diff, because one thing towards the end of the night that we realized is that original paper gasket was like burned onto there.
Yeah, it was kind of hard to get off, and then because it was up high and I didn't have any light in there, I didn't even notice it was there until we were trying to put it back together. So it was pretty on there. So any advice for getting off of gaskets like that?
Let's see. What I don't have at the shop is mineral spirits.
Mineral spirits is supposed to help gaskets get paper gaskets off.
So paper gaskets, RTV, usually mineral spirits will soften that stuff up.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay.
All I had was lacquer thinner, and that didn't work out. So.
Yeah, that's too bad. Paper gaskets are always a bitch. So I gotta try out the mineral spirits thing.
So was this your first time setting up a diff?
No, it wasn't. So so it's my first time properly setting up a diff, but my first experience with the differential, setting up a differential, was in a Miata. And oh my god, that was such a bad turn. In a Miata, and so I had a 1.6 Miata, and if you didn't know, I would call the diff equivalent to an SR5's diff. It's very small. It's not a matter of if it will blow, but when it will blow. So that's always the case with those, if you drive hard on those diffs. So an upgrade for those diffs are to get an 1.8 Torsen, but those can be quite expensive when you're buying them off of Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace or anything like that. So another budget-friendly swap is to actually get an ARC-7, an NA ARC-7 FC's diff and actually put it in. And so this was maybe, I want to say 8 or 7 years ago when I installed it, and I didn't have money at the time, fresh out of high school, working at Target. So I didn't have any money to like actually buy bearings and then like the proper tools you need to actually set like all the backlash and preload and everything. So I kind of just skipped all that. I bought a 1.8 open, and I swapped in the diff by just taking apart the the caps and everything, and just swapping it straight over and tightening it up and calling it a day. And then luckily that diff never blew up on me, but it didn't make a lot of noise when I owned it, so I don't recommend doing that. It was probably dangerous to do that, but yeah, you do what you do when you don't have money. But yeah, do as I say, not as I do, right? So
what what are some notable things you learned from doing the diff today? And by the way, I'm no expert on doing diffs. I've done only a handful, but I know a few stuff from research and a few stuff from experience. What are some like notable things for you today, Chris?
It's a very tedious process, but to do it right, you gotta have kind of gotta have a process down. I mean, it's almost like you gotta like practice or do it a couple of times, right, to get really good at it. But I think what's important is always double checking all your backlash and your gear. Was it the gear contact, the contact pattern on the teeth itself? Because as we noticed, as we started to torque stuff down, it all of that could change, right? So it's always good to double check, triple check. Never bad to be too careful in this case, because an LSD, if you didn't know, it's a pretty involved task, like just to pull the pumpkin off and everything, pull the axles out, drain the oil, like all that stuff's pretty involved. And it took us a whole day, right? So
yeah, we started at 11:30. It is currently 10:19 p.m.
Yeah, so you don't want to be doing that like again, right? So you should just do it right the first time, in my opinion. So
one thing I think that's of key importance is cleaning out the physical axle tubes itself. Why were we cleaning out the axle tubes, Chris?
Oh man, when we pulled the drain plug on it, we instantly noticed that the oil coming out of it was silver. Now, it was also clear, but we noticed a little silver shiny tint on it, and then as we looked into the pan, we just saw like shards of like silver. It looked like someone just poured silver flake into it. And yeah, it didn't stop. It didn't ever stop the whole time it was draining. I think it just stayed silver the entire time it was draining. So yeah, I grenaded that thing.
Yeah, I think important too is like what I told you to wipe off the inside of the stuff, and like big chunks were coming out.
Yeah, so if you guys haven't opened an 8.6 differential yet, there's also 2 windage trays that are held in by tabs that are welded on the inside, right? And it's good to take those out and clean behind those, because yeah, after I took those out, there was like a ton of like metal chunks just coming out. Like I swear I was cleaning that thing for like 15-20 minutes or something, constant, just trying to get all the shards out of it. And I was even finding shards on the outside of the tube where the axle, where the hub of the axle bolts on. So yeah, there was shards everywhere. It's good to give it a once over and actually make sure it's clean. You don't want that running through your diff system when it's being driven hard.
Yeah, so I told Chris to take out those 2 windage trays. They're just clipped in. You can just use like a flathead screwdriver, and through the end of the axle tubes, get a towel and then like push all that junk through into the center section, and then you can like wash out the center section.
Yeah, it's good to get that clean. It might be a little tricky because especially if the diff's never been opened before, it could be a little tricky, especially because it's slick. But I assure you, if you're doing it right, it should come out pretty easily. So just don't force it too much, because I could have potentially damaged it on reinstalling it. So yeah, always be careful. You should never use too much force. You shouldn't have to use that much force on it. So
I have to say, I have headphones on, but the break-in for this Cusco diff is actually really tame compared to the Tomei.
Oh really? Yeah, it seems a lot quieter. Well, a lot quieter when then it was making noise earlier today.
So I've installed 2 different Tomei 1.5 T tracks, and both of them were like, and this one seems like pretty tame. I can feel you getting on the gas in the corners, even though we're not supposed to. But
I know, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. That Cusco Quality, what can I say? No, I'm by no means associated with them, but I've noticed that all the Cusco parts I've ever installed have gone on just fine. I've never had any problems with any of them personally. So Cusco makes a great product.
So shout out to Nick Romano. What did Nick Romano tell us to do, or tell you to do, before we put in that center section?
So after meeting Nick at his at the SEMA booth and talking to him over there, he actually was able to give me some advice on setup, because as you know, the Cusco diffs are extremely adjustable. You have you can adjust the plates of the actual clutch type diff, and you can also remove some springs or add springs to help with the, I'm guessing it's like the preload on the actual disc. But then yeah, it's extremely tunable. You can also switch it from 1.5 way to 2-way, and yeah, so I was able to, so Nick is actually an expert on these Cusco diffs, and I was fortunate enough to tell him like my driving style. And for those of you that don't know, I want to be able, I'm mostly grip, but I do want to be able to drift as well. So I told Nick this, and he told me, okay, set the diff to 1.5 way and set it to 80%. And then he said, I might have to remove.
Hold on. Oh shit! Hold on. 1 second. All right, we're good again. So what did Nick tell you to do?
So I don't know which part we got, but let's just start from the top. So I was fortunate enough to have Nick as a Cusco LSD expert, and he was able to give me some advice on setup based on my driving style. And so I told him that I'm mostly a grip guy, but I do want to be able to drift the car when I need to. So Nick suggested that I set up the LSD with as a 1.5 way and 80% of lock. And he did suggest that I remove a couple springs, but he didn't have an exact amount for me. And he said that it would be a good start the way I had it already, the settings he had given me already. So yeah, I'm grateful to have a good starting point, because otherwise I would have just left it at full lock and then had to deal with it later, right? So so yeah, no, it's an extremely tunable diff, but of course I hope to have to not take it apart like a million times, right? So hopefully this is a good baseline to start with.
I forgot to mention, we also put a 4.7 gear set. We switched Chris from a 4.3 to a 4.7. Why did you want to go 4.7, Chris?
So I wanted to do it for the for more torque and acceleration, but I do understand that you do lose a little top speed from it. So I'm gonna be curious to see what that's like. Especially for drifting, it seems to be the choice to go with, right? But yeah, no, I was also given a recommendation by Grant from Battle Garage. So yeah, I just wanted to go with it, just try it out.
Yeah, I typically gear reduction is like the poor man's horsepower, I think they say, because it feels like your car has more power. So it's good for drifting, right? Like that I don't really know how to say it, like the, not low speed power, but like
oh yeah, the low end. Yeah, the low end. It gives you a little more, because it moves the power back a bit, so you could you have a little more low end torque. You're supposed to be able to come out of the corners a little harder too, but that's assuming you're on the throttle like the whole time. So
yeah, the downside to 4.7 for me, if you road race, the feeling is like you're never in the right gear.
Yeah, I'll have to see for myself, right? I haven't driven one myself on the track, so I can't say.
Have you ever driven a 4.7 car before?
I have, actually, on the street. So I did like the acceleration it had. So
yeah, 4.7's fun on the street. Luckily, you have the M Factory 5th, so it's not a nightmare on the highway.
Yeah, no, so I'm going to be able to give you a more accurate review on that in a bit. But
yeah, so 4.7 plus M Factory 5th, it should actually put your highway cruising RPM back at factory.
Yeah, even with the 4.3, it's actually already pretty nice. So I would recommend it if you are able to grab one, because from what I understand, they're pretty limited, right?
I don't know if Battle Garage has any more.
Oh, okay. I didn't know they already sold out.
Yeah. They might have not. They got in a short run, like let's say, I don't know, like less than 10.
Oh, yeah, I want to say less than that, and then I noticed like maybe almost the instant he posted it up, like 3 or 4 people already bought it. So.
Yeah. I like that day. I think 2 people already bought a set each.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's why we need more interest in this chassis. If we want to keep developing cool parts for these old cars, it's more interest, because these companies won't develop these parts if they don't see any money or kind of gain in it. So yeah, so if you guys want this type of stuff, you should speak out, right?
Or speak out, if there's like people on social, they'll put out a feeler like who's actually interested.
Yeah.
And it always seems to be the case that, a lot of people are interested, but then when it's time to like, okay, it's pre-order time, and then all of a sudden it's like 10% of those people.
Yeah. And I don't know how else to say it, but if you really want these parts, then you gotta want to. I don't know how to say it, right? Like, I guess you gotta participate in the discussion if you want these things to happen, right? If you don't agree with the price, then you're able to talk about it, because we're fortunate to be living in the era where companies are actually reaching out to us on social media, which I think is awesome, because I mean, how would you have done this back in the day, right? Like in the 80s. So
yeah, there'd be no way.
Yeah. So I mean, it's the opportunity to have cool things is there. It's just that we have to all participate together in order to make it happen, right? So
I think that was our 30 minutes.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, 10 to 10:30.
Okay.
All right, so I'm getting really car sick. Why don't we drive back?
Sorry.
Yeah. So thanks again, Chris, for being on the podcast. No shout outs this time, because I'm gonna get really car sick.
Oh, no problem, man. Sorry. I'm kind of underprepared for this one too, but this was just impromptu. So hope you got some good content from this.
Yeah, we'll talk about when the diff is broken in. We'll talk about it next time. Thanks, man.
Cool. We'll update it next. Cool. See you guys next time.